celebration, the kind where families gather under twinkling fairy lights and laughter fills the air. But for me, it turned into a nightmare I'll never forget. My brother's grand wedding was the talk of the town, a lavish affair with gold-trimmed invitations, towering flower arrangements, and enough food to feed an army. Everyone was dressed to impress, their smiles gleaming brighter than the chandeliers above. Except mine. Because as I stood there in my modest dress, trying to blend into the crowd, I felt like an outsider in my own family. The humiliation began before the ceremony even started. My parents cornered me near the entrance, their faces twisted with disdain. "Look at you," my mother hissed, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "You're wearing that? Do you have any idea how embarrassing you are?" Her words hit me like a slap, but they weren't done yet. My father chimed in, louder this time so everyone nearby could hear. "You've always been a disappointment," he spat, his eyes cold and unyielding. "An embarrassment to our bloodline. Why couldn't you be more like your brothers?" I wanted to disappear. Tears burned behind my eyelids, but I refused to let them fall. Not here, not now. The weight of their words crushed me, but something inside me snapped too. This wasn't the first time they'd treated me this way, but tonight felt different. Tonight, I realized I didn't deserve this cruelty. And just when I thought things couldn't get worse, a hush fell over the room as someone stepped forward, someone no one expected, someone who would change everything. Growing up in my family felt like living under a spotlight that only ever shone on my flaws. From the moment I could remember, I was compared to my older brother, Ethan, the golden child whose every achievement was celebrated like a national holiday. While he excelled at academics, sports, and charm, I stumbled through life feeling invisible. My parents' love seemed conditional, reserved only for those who met their impossible standards. They called me lazy when I struggled with schoolwork, clumsy when I tripped over my own feet, and awkward when I failed to make friends easily. It wasn't just criticism, it was relentless, cutting deep into my self-worth until I believed I truly was unworthy. But what hurt most was how they dismissed my dreams. When I told them about my passion for writing, my mother laughed, saying, "That's cute, dear, but don't expect anyone to take it seriously." My father added, "Real success comes from hard work, not scribbling nonsense in notebooks." Their words stung, but worse still was the look in their eyes, a mix of pity and disdain, as if I were wasting my life pursuing something meaningful to me. Behind closed doors, their disapproval became outright hostility. There were nights when dinner table conversations turned into interrogations. "Why can't you be more like Ethan?" Or, "What's wrong with you?" Each question felt like another brick added to the wall between us. Once, after failing a math test, my father slammed his fist on the table and shouted, "You're a disgrace." I flinched, tears streaming down my face, while Ethan sat silently, pretending not to notice. He rarely intervened, perhaps afraid of rocking the boat, or maybe because he agreed with them. And then there was the isolation. As much as I craved connection, my parents made sure I stayed alone. Birthday parties? Rarely allowed. Sleepovers? Out of the question. Friends came and went, but none stuck around long enough to see past the cracks in my facade. By high school, I had convinced myself that I didn't need anyone, that being alone was safer than risking rejection again. But loneliness gnawed at me, leaving scars no one could see. Yet amidst all this darkness, one thing kept me going. Hope. Hope that someday, somehow, I'd prove them wrong. That I'd find someone who saw value in me, who believed in the person I knew I could become. Little did I know that someone was already closer than I realized. The wedding hall buzzed with energy, laughter rippling through the crowd as guests mingled beneath cascading floral arrangements. Crystal glasses clinked, and soft music floated in the background, creating an atmosphere of elegance and joy. But for me, the scene felt surreal, like watching a movie I didn't belong in. My heart pounded in my chest as I tried to steady myself, gripping the edge of the chair beside me. Every smile directed at me felt like a dagger wrapped in silk, every compliment about Ethan sliced deeper than the last. My mother leaned closer, her lips curled into a sneer that barely disguised her contempt. Do you even realize how much effort we've put into today? She whispered harshly, her voice dripping with venom. And here you are, sulking like some pathetic shadow. You ruin everything you touch. Her words landed like blows, each syllable heavier than the last. I opened my mouth to respond, to defend myself, but no sound came out. My throat tightened, choking back the storm of emotions threatening to spill over. Then my father stepped in, his booming voice slicing through the hum of conversation. Enough is enough, he barked, drawing stares from nearby guests. His face flushed red, veins pulsing visibly on his temples. We've given you every opportunity, and yet you squander them all. Look at yourself. No ambition, no direction, nothing to show for your existence. His words echoed off the walls, amplifying the shame burning inside me. I wanted to shrink away, to vanish completely, but his gaze pinned me in place, unrelenting and cruel. You're a stain on this family, he continued, his tone dropping to a menacing growl. Ethan has brought honor to our name, while you bring nothing but disgrace. The finality in his voice shattered whatever fragile composure I had left. My vision blurred with tears I refused to shed, my hands trembling as I clenched them into fists. The room seemed to spin, the cheerful chatter fading into a distant hum as his words reverberated in my mind. A few guests exchanged uncomfortable glances, whispering behind raised hands. Some looked away, embarrassed by the spectacle unfolding before them, while others watched with morbid curiosity. One woman murmured to her companion, "Poor girl, they're tearing her apart." Another man shook his head, muttering something about family drama, but none of them stepped forward. None of them said a word to stop it. As the weight of their judgment pressed down on me, I felt myself breaking, not just emotionally, but physically. My knees buckled slightly, forcing me to grip the chair tighter to stay upright. My breaths came in shallow gasps, panic clawing at my chest. For a moment, I thought I might collapse right there, exposed and humiliated in front of everyone. But then, amidst the chaos, a new emotion surged within me, defiance. A spark ignited in the depths of my despair, fueled by years of pent-up pain and resentment. I straightened my spine, lifting my chin despite the tremor in my voice. "You don't get to define me," I said, my words barely audible over the din. My mother scoffed, rolling her eyes, but my father froze, his expression shifting from anger to disbelief. "I may not be perfect," I continued, louder this time, "but I am more than your insults. More than your disappointment." My voice cracked, but I forced myself to keep going. "And one day, you'll see that." For a split second, silence hung heavy in the air. Then, without warning, a figure emerged from the crowd, a presence so commanding it silenced the entire room. All eyes turned toward him, including mine. In that moment, everything changed. The room fell silent as he stepped forward, his tall frame cutting through the sea of stunned faces. It was Liam, my secret boyfriend of 6 months, the one person who had seen me at my lowest and loved me anyway. He wore a simple black suit, tailored perfectly to his lean build, but it wasn't his appearance that commanded attention. It was the fire in his piercing blue eyes, the set of his jaw that spoke volumes before he even opened his mouth. "Excuse me," Liam said, his voice calm yet firm, slicing through the tension like a blade. Heads turned sharply, whispers dying mid-sentence as everyone took in the unexpected interruption. My parents froze, their expressions morphing from shock to confusion. My father's face darkened further, his brows knitting together as if trying to place this stranger who dared intrude on their private humiliation. My mother's lips parted slightly, her earlier sneer faltering as she studied him with wary curiosity. Liam didn't wait for an invitation. With measured steps, he crossed the distance between us, stopping directly beside me. His hand found mine, warm and steady, grounding me in a way I hadn't realized I needed. For a fleeting moment, I forgot how to breathe. No one outside our small circle of trust knew about us. Not my family, not even my closest friends. We'd kept our relationship hidden, fearing exactly this kind of reaction. Yet here he was, standing tall and unapologetic, ready to face whatever storm awaited. "This needs to stop," Liam declared, his tone leaving no room for argument. He addressed my parents directly, his gaze unwavering. "Whatever issues you have with your daughter, humiliating her in front of everyone isn't the answer. She deserves better than this, from you, from anyone." His words hung in the air, sharp and undeniable, forcing the crowd to hold its collective breath. My father sputtered, caught off guard by the audacity of this unknown man. "Who do you think you are?" he demanded, his voice rising to match his indignation. "This is none of your business." "It becomes my business when I see someone I care about being treated like garbage," Liam shot back, his voice steady, but laced with steel. The room erupted into murmurs, some guests nodding in agreement while others exchanged uneasy glances. My mother, meanwhile, looked positively livid, her cheeks flushing crimson as she struggled to regain control of the situation. "She's our daughter," she snapped, attempting to assert authority. "We know what's best for her." "No," Liam countered, his voice cutting through hers like a knife. "You don't. What you're doing right now. This isn't parenting, it's cruelty. And if you can't see that, then maybe you're the ones who should be ashamed." Gasps rippled through the crowd, followed by a wave of murmured approval. A few people nodded emphatically, while others shifted uncomfortably, clearly torn between siding with tradition or supporting this bold interloper. My brother Ethan, who had been lingering nearby, finally stepped closer, his expression unreadable. He glanced at me briefly before focusing on Liam, his posture stiffening as though bracing for confrontation. "What gives you the right to speak to us this way?" my father bellowed, his face reddening further. "You don't know anything about our family." "I know enough," Liam replied evenly, his gaze never wavering. "I know that your daughter is brilliant, talented, and kind-hearted. I know she works harder than anyone else I've ever met. And I know that she doesn't deserve to be treated like she's worthless." He paused, letting his words sink in before adding, "If you can't respect her, then maybe it's time someone else did." The impact of his declaration rippled through the room like a seismic wave. Guests exchanged wide-eyed looks, some whispering behind cupped hands while others openly stared. My mother's mask of superiority cracked, revealing a flicker of vulnerability beneath. Even my father, usually so quick to dominate any conversation, seemed momentarily speechless, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. As the tension mounted, Liam turned to me, his expression softening. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly, his thumb brushing gently against the back of my hand. I nodded, though tears threatened to spill over once again. His presence gave me strength, anchoring me in a moment that might otherwise have swept me away entirely. But the drama wasn't over yet. Just as my parents began to recover from their initial shock, another figure approached, Ethan. His arrival sent another ripple through the gathering, his quiet demeanor contrasting sharply with the explosive energy radiating from Liam. Whatever happened next would determine whether this confrontation ended in reconciliation or irreparable damage. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the faint rustle of fabric as Ethan moved closer. His eyes darted between Liam and me, searching for answers neither of us was ready to give. Finally, he spoke, his voice low but steady. "What's going on here?" he asked, addressing no one in particular. His gaze lingered on our clasped hands, and I could see the gears turning in his mind as he pieced together the truth. My father, still fuming, pointed an accusatory finger at Liam. This boy thinks he can waltz in here and lecture us about how to raise our children," he spat, his voice shaking with barely contained rage. "He knows nothing about us or our values." Liam didn't flinch. Instead, he squared his shoulders, meeting my father's glare head-on. "Values?" he repeated, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Is humiliating your own flesh and blood part of your values? Because if it is, maybe you need to rethink what kind of legacy you're leaving behind." The jab struck a nerve. My father's face contorted with fury, but before he could retaliate, Ethan stepped between them, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "Enough," he said firmly, his voice cutting through the mounting tension.
"Dad, stop.
This isn't helping anyone. For a moment, my father looked like he might explode. But then, something shifted in his expression. A flicker of doubt, perhaps, or the realization that his behavior was spiraling out of control. He took a step back, though his jaw remained clenched. Ethan turned to me next, his expression softer now. "Sis," he began, his voice tinged with regret. "I'm sorry. I should have said something sooner. I've known for a while that things weren't right." His voice trailed off, guilt etched across his features. "You knew?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He nodded, looking down at the floor. "Yeah. I heard Mom and Dad talking sometimes. I thought maybe they'd come around eventually. But I see now that was naive of me." He hesitated, then added, "I should have stood up for you. I'm sorry I didn't." Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, but I blinked them away. "It's not your fault," I said softly, though the ache in my chest suggested otherwise. Ethan sighed heavily, running a hand through his hair. "Maybe not. But I still could have done more. And I will from now on." Before I could respond, Liam spoke up again, his voice calm but resolute. "Your sister doesn't need apologies," he said, addressing both Ethan and my parents. "She needs action. Real change. If you truly care about her, you'll start treating her with the respect and love she deserves." My mother, who had been unusually quiet throughout the exchange, finally found her voice. "We do love her," she insisted, though her tone lacked conviction. We want what's best for her." "And what does that mean exactly?" Liam challenged, arching an eyebrow. "Does it mean belittling her at every turn? Making her feel like she's never good enough? Because if that's love, then you've got a funny way of showing it." The room fell silent again, the weight of his words sinking in. My mother's lip quivered, and for the first time, I saw genuine remorse in her eyes. She reached out tentatively, as if to touch my arm, but pulled back when I instinctively recoiled. I didn't mean for it to go this far," she stammered, her voice cracking. I thought pushing you would make you stronger. But I see now that I was wrong." Her admission caught me off guard. For years, I dreamed of hearing those words, of seeing even a sliver of acknowledgement that their treatment of me had been unfair. And yet, now that it was happening, I felt conflicted. Part of me wanted to lash out, to let them feel even a fraction of the pain they'd inflicted on me. But another part, the part that still clung to the hope of reconciliation, yearned for closure. Taking a deep breath, I stepped forward, releasing Liam's hand. "Mom, Dad," I began, my voice trembling but clear. "I forgive you." Their heads snapped up, shock written all over their faces. "You what?" my father sputtered, clearly taken aback. "I forgive you," I repeated, louder this time. "Not because you deserve it, not yet, but because holding on to this anger is destroying me. I don't want to live like that anymore." My mother burst into tears, covering her face with her hands. My father looked utterly lost, his usual bravado crumbling under the weight of my words. Ethan placed a comforting hand on his shoulder, offering silent support. "But forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting," I continued, my voice growing stronger. "If you really mean what you're saying, if you really want to fix this, then prove it. Stop comparing me to Ethan. Stop treating me like I'm less than. And start seeing me for who I am, not who you wish I was." They nodded fervently, my mother wiping her tears with the back of her hand. "We will," she promised, her voice choked with emotion. "We'll try harder. I swear." Liam squeezed my hand, pride shining in his eyes. "That's all anyone can ask for," he said softly, leaning close so only I could hear. "Now it's up to them to follow through." As the tension in the room began to dissipate, replaced by a fragile sense of hope, I realized something profound. Forgiving them didn't erase the pain they'd caused, nor did it guarantee they'd change overnight. But it freed me from their toxicity, from the chains of resentment that had bound me for so long. And for the first time in years, I felt truly alive. The aftermath of that night unfolded like waves retreating from the shore, slowly, unevenly, but inevitably reshaping the landscape. My parents' apology wasn't perfect, and neither was their transformation. Change, I learned, doesn't happen overnight, especially when decades of ingrained habits and expectations are involved. But there were moments, small, tentative gestures, that gave me hope. Like the morning after the wedding, when my mother called me into the kitchen and handed me a steaming cup of tea. "I read one of your stories last night," she said, her voice hesitant but sincere. It was beautiful. Her words caught me off guard, and for a moment, I didn't know how to respond. Writing had always been my sanctuary, the one thing I clung to when everything else felt hopeless. Hearing her acknowledge it, not as a hobby or a distraction, but as something meaningful, felt like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. "Thank you," I managed to say, my voice thick with emotion. From then on, things began to shift, however incrementally. My father stopped making snide remarks about my career aspirations and instead asked thoughtful questions about my writing projects. It wasn't easy for him. I could see the effort etched into his furrowed brow whenever he stumbled over unfamiliar territory. But he tried, and that mattered more than I cared to admit. Ethan, too, became a steadfast ally. He started inviting me to coffee dates, where we talked about everything from childhood memories to future dreams. During one such meeting, he confessed, "I always envied you, you know." "Me?" I asked, incredulous. "Why would you envy me?" "Because you're brave," he said simply. "You chase what makes you happy, even when it's hard. I've spent my whole life trying to live up to their expectations, but you refuse to let them define you." His words stayed with me long after our conversation ended, planting seeds of understanding I hadn't anticipated. For so long, I'd viewed Ethan as the embodiment of perfection, untouchable and unshakable. But beneath his polished exterior lay insecurities and doubts that mirrored my own. Realizing this didn't diminish my struggles, but it humanized him and, in turn, softened the edges of our fractured relationship. As for Liam, he remained my rock, my confidant, and my biggest cheerleader. Together, we navigated the complexities of blending our lives while managing the fallout from that explosive night. At first, my parents were wary of him, unsure how to reconcile their guilt with the man who had publicly called them out. But Liam's patience and authenticity won them over, bit by bit. Watching him interact with them, offering advice without condescension, challenging them gently but firmly, taught me the power of grace under pressure. One evening, months later, we gathered at my parents' house for dinner. The atmosphere was lighter than it had been in years, filled with laughter and genuine connection. Midway through dessert, my father cleared his throat and stood up, signaling for everyone's attention. "I just wanted to say," he began, his voice wavering slightly, "thank you to all of you for sticking with us through, well, everything." He glanced at me, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Especially you, sweetheart. You've shown us what real strength looks like, and we're lucky to have you in our lives." The room erupted in applause, but I barely heard it. All I could focus on was the sincerity in his voice, the raw vulnerability that replaced the harshness I'd grown accustomed to. It wasn't a Hollywood ending. There were still rough patches ahead, moments when old wounds threatened to reopen, but it was progress. And for the first time, I allowed myself to believe that healing was possible. Looking back, I realized that forgiveness wasn't just a gift to my parents, it was also a gift to myself. Letting go of the bitterness that had weighed me down for so long freed me to embrace the life I'd always dreamed of, a life rooted in love, creativity, and purpose. Standing there, surrounded by the people who mattered most, I knew I'd finally found my